Thanks, Caroline. I have two questions for you on crime crackdown.
Sure.
Democrats have tried to argue that red states have higher crime rates while overlooking problems of high crime in blue cities. I'm wondering if the president would consider working with red state governors to fix high crime in blue cities like in Memphis, Tennessee.
So first of all, I want to get to the premise of your question, Reagan, which is being pushed by Democrats, that there is crime in red states.
Karoline did not like that question, by the way, because she just called out Karoline and this administration for their exact ineptitude and incompetence and neglect of crime in red states. They just want to punish blue states and flex their authoritarian muscles to show that they will put troops at voting sites during the midterm elections. They will put ICE agents at voting booths to scare black and brown people who speak Spanish. It was just ruled 6-3 in California that ICE, the Supreme Court ruled, can racially profile people. They can just go up to people and if they speak Spanish, if they are working outside Home Depot, a construction site, etc., boom, snatched up in a van. That's the real crime that's taking place. That's the real crime that's taking place in this country. But of course, Karoline Leavitt's going to say that there's crime in all parts of the country, including red states. I guarantee you that's what she's going to say.
Of course, there is crime in all states, but the crime in these cities is all in cities that are run by Democrats. If you look at the list of the top 20 high crime cities in the United States, every single one, with the exception of one in Louisiana, is run by a Democrat. And these Democrats have supported this.
This is not true, by the way. Everything this administration says needs to be scrutinized, okay? Understand this. This is the same administration that ran on releasing the Epstein files. This is the same administration that said the files were on Pam Bondi's desk. They gave little binders to C-list MAGA right-wing incel influencers like libs of TikTok on Twitter for them to hold up these little binders and be like, we got the Epstein list, see, and they're all smiling. None of them were there when Epstein survivors spoke at the Capitol asking why the Trump administration suddenly says that the files are a hoax. You ran on a hoax. And then you have the fact that Donald Trump wrote Epstein a birthday letter and they're best friends, but none of that is real. And then Mike Johnson says Trump is an FBI informant, but then he walked that back too. So if they're lying about that, and they lied about Iran, and they're lying about ICE, what makes you think they're telling the truth about crime? What makes you think they're telling the truth about what's happening in our cities? Remember, they fired the person in charge of releasing the jobs report because the jobs report showed the economy was slowing, and they said, you're fired. Well, the next jobs report looked even worse from their own person, their own hand-picked person. They can't even lie correctly.
Same policies that I spoke about at the beginning of this briefing, like cashless bail. If you look at a red state, Mississippi, but a Democrat-run city in that state, Jackson, in 2019, Jackson, Mississippi eliminated cash bail for virtually all misdemeanor cases. And while Jackson is not formally a sanctuary city, the state of Mississippi formally banned sanctuary cities, and this city has acted as a de facto sanctuary city for criminals and illegal aliens since 2017.
By the way, states with the highest homicide rates are red states. So many red states outnumber blue states when it comes to deaths by gun violence, which is the real killer, by the way. And it's because of guns. And, you know, say what you will about the failures of the Democratic Party, but at least one party tries to ban weapons of war from the streets, tries to implement universal background checks. That was one moment of progress we saw during the Biden administration. They went after guns harder than previous administrations. That was good to see. And nobody's saying we're going to take your guns away, but the only administration trying to take your guns away is the Trump administration. They are trying to ban transgender Americans from owning guns because they think that's going to solve crime.
Same thing, Birmingham, Alabama, a Democrat-run city in a red state. In 2017, the Birmingham City Council unanimously passed a resolution, quote, committing to establish sanctuary policies. So if you actually look at the facts from these Democrat-run cities, these are cities that are run by Democrats and by by members of the Democrat Party. These are blue cities, and they have all supported these disastrous policies which allow repeated career criminals back onto the streets to further commit acts of violence. And so to answer your question, yes, the president wants to work with anyone across this country who wants to end these horrible policies and to bring law and order to our streets. And I think that is proven by his tremendous cooperation with the mayor of Washington, D.C. and our...
Okay, great. Well, then why the fuck is Trump starting Operation Midway Blitz in Chicago, where he's going to make Chicago feel the wrath of the Department of War, which is absurd, but has had zero coordination with the mayor of Chicago, zero coordination with the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, and he's been planning this entire siege of Chicago in secret without even working with the Chicago Police Department. So I'm so glad that Trump worked with with the mayor of D.C., which is a different situation, by the way, because D.C. is not a state. But what's going on in Chicago is so unconstitutional that even right-wing influencers are saying, this is enough.
Nation's capital, and just look at the results of that. And I do have some updates for you on the DC crime crackdown if anyone is interested. There have been a total of 2,177 arrests made since the start of the operation on August 7th. Just last night, there were 57 arrests made in Washington, D.C. Of the 57 arrests, there were 14 illegal aliens who were arrested, many of whom had prior criminal histories, and other arrests.
You say many of whom had prior illegal histories. So not all of them had prior illegal histories. And I thought the whole premise was you were going to go after criminals, rapists, gang members. Now you just snatch up anybody who's even suspected of being an undocumented migrant. Anybody that even speaks Spanish could get snatched up by this administration. Think about that. I want you to process that for a second here. And now they don't even hide it. They say some of these people were criminals, some weren't. Oh well, it's good for our quota though, because then I can come up here on the podium and say we snatched up 14 of them and only 3 of them were criminals. But we can just say many of them were criminals.
Just last night in our nation's capital, so you all can be very grateful for this. Our great men and women of law enforcement, both federal and local, working together as they should, made an arrest on a warrant for assault with the intent to kill. The subject shot 2 adult males after an altercation. They made an arrest on a warrant for an armed carjacking. The subject assaulted an adult male in the face with a firearm and then took his keys. We also made an arrest on a warrant for simple assault and the destruction of property and subsequently charged with second-degree theft.
Someone asked, how do they know they're criminals? Great fucking question. They don't. And by the way, ICE just ruled that they will now forego paperwork when conducting arrests in order to speed up their arrests, in order to speed up the quota. They're not even going to fill out paperwork for people. They'll just snatch people up, arrest people, no due process, no evidence, no paperwork, etc. Throw somebody in a van, disappear them, and maybe send them to a country they've never even been to before. Welcome to the United States of America.
Last night in D.C., there was an arrest for possession of a controlled substance with second-degree theft. There was an arrest for possession of a controlled substance with the intent to distribute that subject. The person is also a subject of interest in a homicide and a carjacking. Last night in D.C., we also arrested a felon in possession of a firearm who was carrying that firearm without a license. So these are the career criminals. These are the bad guys that we are picking up in Washington, D.C. every day. The president would love to do this in every Democrat-run city across the country, and he hopes that more Democrats will call the White House to allow us to help them.
It's funny that you are like celebrating that you arrested somebody who had a weapon without a license when your party is so complicit in gun violence. Your party is so corrupt by the National Rifle Association that you would like anybody to be able to buy a gun without any license, any background check. So you aren't allowed to celebrate the fact that you got a gun criminal off the street when you are literally advocating for teachers to own guns, principals to have guns, priests to have guns. You want bulletproof windows and metal detectors at schools because you would rather children be martyrs than actually solve the gun violence crime in this country.